Today on Mina Studio, how to record a worship music video for your online church. Welcome to Mina Studio. My name is Nathan. With me as always is my tech director and newly appointed online church coordinator, Ronald. Today we're going to talk about making worship music videos for your online church, either from your home or from your church. First, I'll show you my studio setup that I use to film the REAWAKEN hymns worship music sets, and hopefully give you some ideas for your own studio setup to film. Then we'll go into Logic Pro, and I'll show you how I mix that audio that we've recorded. And then finally, we'll go over to Final Cut Pro and put the whole video together. Although I don't do a whole lot in Final Cut Pro, most of our time today will be spent in Logic Pro mixing the audio. So here's the space that I record my worship music videos in. Obviously, I have all the necessities: a camera, microphones, and lighting. Those are the big three that you'll need. We'll start with my camera. This is the Canon SL2, and it's got a Sigma 1.8 18-35 lens on it. The lens is awesome, but it is a slightly expensive lens. It's $600, costs about the same as the camera itself. But honestly, the lenses are as or more important than the camera itself. Obviously, you don't need to use the same camera. You could even use your iPhone as long as you can get a good setup and a good shot with it. And if you'd like a budget tripod recommendation, this is the K&F Concepts tripod from Amazon. I really like it. It's about $60 or $70. Really versatile, and for a video tripod, that is very cheap. We have my lights over here. These are two Limo Studio softboxes. They got big fluorescent bulbs in them. They're really bright, really soft. You can get similar ones on Amazon for about $60. I have them both set up off to the side. One is fairly close to directly in front of me, but still off to the side a bit. And then the other is coming almost from 90 degrees. I like this because it gives a semi-dramatic look to the music video, but it's not very harsh. It's not like a film noir music video or something. I also have two LED panels on the back wall, and they're shining up, and those are really just there to give some atmosphere to that back gray wall. In front of me, I have my chord sheets and my iPad, which has my liturgy on it. So the iPad has all my prayers and my scripture readings I do during the service, and then I've made my chord charts really big, printed them out, and put them on a tripod so I can see them clearly. And I change the pages on my iPad with this foot pedal here. It's the air turn foot pedal. For these videos, I've been using a Martin guitar. I know that's almost heretical if you've watched my videos much. I'm a Taylor guy, but I got this Martin 000 X1AE guitar, and I really like it. It sounds really good for these videos. It's a bit quieter than my Taylor, so it's not as hard for me to get my voice to project. So I have two microphones set up to capture the audio. One is the large diaphragm Audio-Technica AT2020. That's there for my vocals, but it does pick up a lot of guitar as well. And then I have this MXL small pencil condenser microphone that is picking up my guitar, and that's really just adding some stereo image and some flavor to the overall sound. The vocal mic, the large condenser, is actually picking up most of the sound, and I like this two mic arrangement because I can adjust the levels of my guitar and vocals just a bit. Most of the audio for both the guitar and vocals still comes from the vocal mic, but that guitar mic down there does add a lot of definition, and it provides a stereo image to make the guitar a little more interesting and sound a little more real and in person. And then both of those mics are running back to my iMac, and I'm recording the audio in Logic Pro X. And finally, I have the words displayed on the wall so people can sing along with me. There's two ways to display words in your worship music videos. One, you can have a TV or a projector like I do and display them live while you're recording, or you can add them in post-production later. You can do so actually in your editing software like Final Cut or iMovie, or you can bring in a separate piece of software like Pro Presenter to add those lyrics in. I've chosen to do them live have the lyrics displaying live while I'm recording. That way I have a lot less work to do in post. Of course, the tricky part of that is you do have to have another person there to run the slides while you're recording. The slides are coming from my station back here. This is just my MacBook and an external monitor running Google Slides. And then it's casting to a Chromecast that's connected to the TV. All right, so we've got our video recorded onto our camera. We've got our audio recorded straight into Logic Pro. Now let's do some editing. So after I did my first recording and got everything, all the plugins, all the panning, all that how I wanted it, I then made a copy, deleted all the audio, deleted all the automation, and set it up as a template so that each week I record, I just copy that template and I have a blank slate with all of my plugins and everything already just how I like them, so every week sounds the same. You can see I have my 2 channels here that coordinate with my 2 microphones that you saw earlier. I have the vocal mic channel, which is that large diaphragm condenser, and the guitar mic, which is the pencil condenser you saw pointed at my guitar. Obviously, I use a 2 mic setup to record these videos. If you yourself are recording with guitar and vocals, you can do so with the 2 mic setup like I have, or another popular way to do it is to plug your guitar directly in and use a more isolating vocal mic like a SM58, and that will keep the guitar and vocals separated so you don't have bleed in each channel. The benefit is you can mix each channel more independently with different plugins. For instance, if you want to use auto-tune on your vocals, you're able to do so because you're not going to end up auto-tuning a guitar, which sounds terrible, by the way. And you can use different plugins on a guitar than you might be able to use on vocals. The downside is it doesn't sound as good. I really don't like how guitars plugged in sound. The vocals you can get pretty close with like an SM58 as you could with a large diaphragm. You can get them to sound pretty similar, but the guitar, I just don't like the sound of guitars plugged in. It's very quacky. You know, quack, you know what that means, like the high mid quacky sound, and it's really hard to get rid of. Even really expensive, like $3,000-$4,000 guitars still don't sound as good plugged in as they sound with a microphone. So I've chosen to use a 2 microphone system so I can get a better guitar and vocal sound and sacrifice some ability to mix them independently. You can see I have the 2 channels panned. I have the vocal mic panned slightly right, not very much because I don't want the vocals off center, but I do have the guitar mic panned a little more left, and that's so I can get kind of a stereo image. Typically, if you're miking a guitar with 2 mics, just a guitar, you'll put one down below the sound hole and one up kind of at a 12th fret, pointed in, and then you can pan each all the way and get a nice stereo sound. Because I'm using 2 mics, but one of them's for vocals, I can't really pan all the way, so I'm just panning just enough so I can get a stereo image with the guitar, but not get the vocals off center. So you can see down here I have all of my plugins off when I record. That's just so I don't tax the system too much, tax my processor too much. I don't want any skips or pops or anything. So I turn off all my plugins while I'm recording, and then I'll go back in and turn them on when I start mixing. You can see here on my vocal and guitar channel, I have a ridiculous amount of plugins. I know, it's an absurd amount of plugins. The reason why there's so many is because I'm mixing and mastering all in the same channel here. I'm not bringing it later to master it. I'm mastering it here. So I'll go through the plugins I have on both channels. Both the vocal mic and guitar mic have the same plugins on them. So I start with a compressor. The compressor brings the lows and the highs of your sound closer together. It basically squashes your volume in a very advanced way with algorithms. And you do so that the very quiet part of your songs and the very loud part of your songs aren't drastically different volumes. They'll still be different volumes as long as you don't over compress it, but they'll bring them closer together so people don't have to turn the volume knob up and down. Then I have a high pass filter, or a low cut filter would be another way to put it. That's just to get rid of some of that low rumble that I don't want. Then this DC1A2 is kind of a very colorful vintage style compressor plugin that I found for free that I really like. So it's basically another compressor. It just adds a little more color than the stock one. Then I have 2 channel EQs. It's a little much. You don't need 2 channel EQs. I just like to. I'm just weird. Then I have my Space Designer, which is my reverb plugin. I love the Space Designer plugin. Again, reverb is imitating the sound of real life. Basically, it's echoes off walls and stuff. It makes your recording sound real. So anytime you hear audio in the real world, there's reverb on it because the audio is bouncing off of something. When you record in a studio, especially with isolation, there's very little reverb picked up and it can sound unnatural. So reverb is just to make your voice and guitar sound real, like it's in a real room with the person. Then a limiter, it basically stops the audio at a certain point and keeps anything from peaking. So you can set, I don't want any of my audio to go over -0.2 dB, and then none of your audio will peak past that. Then another compressor, then another limiter. Don't turn off the video. There's a reason for this, sort of. I'm not just crazy. Well, I'm a little bit crazy, let's be honest. Why do I have so many compressors and limiters? Well, honestly, you could do this with just 1 compressor and 1 limiter, but I was taught, whether this is right or wrong, I don't know, but I feel like I can hear that it sounds better. Who knows if that's just a placebo effect or not. That I've been taught that you should step up compressors and limiters. So compress a little, limit a little, then compress a little more, limit a little more, then brick wall limiter at the end so you don't get any peaking. Is that necessary? I have no idea. But it's how I do it, and I like the results, and there's no reason for me to change it now. But you could probably get away with just 1 compressor and 1 limiter. No problem. So if you don't want to go crazy and use all those plugins, I would recommend at least a compressor, a limiter at the end so you don't have any peaking, EQ, just to tweak the sound to make it sound good, and reverb to add a little realism to the sound. That's really the 4 most important plugins for a worship music video, I would say. I know some people like to add auto-tune as well on their voice for these worship recordings. Unfortunately, with this setup, that's very hard to do because we have guitar and vocals picked up in both mics. Adding auto-tune to the vocal mic will also get some guitar auto-tune, which sounds really bad. You don't want that. So unfortunately in this setup, you can't really do auto-tune. If that's really important to you, you should use a setup like I mentioned before with plugging the guitar straight in and using a more isolating mic like SM58. So here's what the audio sounds like before any plugins are added. It will be a little bit quiet. It already sounds pretty good because of our mic setup in our room, but needs a lot more work with the plugins. So now I'll go and turn on all of my plugins. Again, these have been copied from previous worship sets, so I have all the settings like I like, and I usually don't mess with them much at all because I use the same setup every week. Now let's hear what it sounds like with all the plugins on. It'll be much louder this time. Was shed for me, and thou biddest me come to thee, O Lamb of God. I come. Huge difference. So you can hear that panning a little bit as well. It's not drastic in any way. The vocals still sound like they're right down the middle, but you can hear a little distinction from the guitar being panned. I'll show you the difference by muting each of the mics, and you'll hear what they each sound like separately and then together. But that thy blood so I'll mute the guitar mic. For me, and not a big difference, but when I turn it back on, adds a little bit. Now I've muted the vocal mic. You can see that's where most of the sound is coming from. Turn that back on. Just as I am and wait. So you can hear the guitar mic isn't actually adding a lot of volume or sound, but when you add it to that vocal mic, which is picking up the majority of sound, it adds definitely something really nice to it with the stereo image, a little bass, a little more definition. All right, so we have our music sounding like we want it to. Next, we have to deal with the talking, because what you don't want your talking to sound like is this. Stray from us. Now let's read a verse that sounds like you're talking in the middle of a cathedral. You don't want nearly as much reverb on your talking voice as you do on your singing voice. So what I do is I go through and I listen to where I'm talking, and I make a cut, the beginning and the end of the talking, and then I drag that section down to a different track without reverb. So this is my speaking track right here. You can see it has all of the exact same plugins with the exact same settings on it, except I do not turn on the reverb. That's the only difference of that track. So I'll make a cut here, then I'll make a cut here, then I'll drag this down to the speaking track, and it'll be the exact same settings but with no reverb. In Logic Pro, this is the easiest way I found to do this. Some DAWs will let you just turn down the reverb at certain parts. In Logic Pro, I haven't found an easy way to do that other than complicated automation. If there is an easier way to turn off and on certain plugins, please let me know. I would love to know how to do that, but I'm not sure there's an easy way to do that in Logic Pro except with complicated automation, and it was just much easier to just make another track and drag it down. Now let me show you what that'll sound like. I actually have a project that's completely finished. I already mixed. Let me bring us into that so you can see what the final product looks like. All right, so here is a completed project. This one I've already mixed. This video has already been sent out. Let me zoom out and you can see, there we go, all the stuff I have. So we have our vocal track here. We have our guitar mic track here. And you can see on our speaking track, I've cut out the speaking bits from the vocal track and move them down in the same spot. I'll show you what that transition sounds like. Good morning, Central. Welcome to chapel. Happy Friday. Hope your morning is going well so far. As you can see, the speaking sounds much better without all that reverb on it. You can also see I've done some volume automation on the guitar track. Basically, on songs that have quiet guitar with a lot of picking, I'm bringing up that guitar track, and on songs where I'm playing really hard and strumming, I bring it down. These bottom three tracks here are actually just pads. Sometimes I'll add very, very quiet pads to the background of the songs. Of course, those are optional. You don't need to do that. That's just something that I think sounds really good. And that's pretty much it for mixing. Then you just bounce the project out to a file. I usually do AIFF, so I have an uncompressed file for working with in Final Cut Pro. All right, so we have our finished audio file. We've moved our video files off of our camera onto our computer. I just dragged and dropped. And then we drag all of that into Final Cut Pro. Literally just drag the files into Final Cut Pro. Then we put our video together, which honestly is the easiest part of this whole thing. So you drag your video you want into the timeline, drag the audio you want into the timeline, and then to synchronize the audio, you can either choose to let Final Cut do it automatically. To do that, you select the audio and video clips, go to Clip, then Synchronize Clips. Mine's grayed out because I've already done too much to the clip, but you should have synchronized clips right there, and hopefully that will match the audio and video correctly. I don't typically use that. Again, I'm just weird. I don't know. I do it manually, and how I do that, I zoom in very close to the audio and video, put up the audio on both so I can see both waveforms, and then I'll find a point like this, a peak that's equal, and then I'll drag those to the same spot and listen and see if they sound right. Let's start with a call to worship from Psalm 22. Those are matched up, so good to go. Might take a little dragging back and forth to find relatively where the audio file should be, but once you get those relatively close, you'll be able to see very accurately where it goes. And it really only takes me maybe 30 seconds, a minute to manually sync the audio and video. So our audio is already edited and all the effects are on it. We don't really have to touch the audio at all. We will want to do some minor tweaks on our video, hopefully not too much if you filmed it well. So I just use a color correction. It's a color board in Final Cut. Sharpen a little bit, not too much. And I use a LUT. You don't need to use a LUT if you don't know what a LUT is. It's basically like a preset look that you can apply to your video that people make. I found one I really liked, but not necessarily you could achieve the same look with just manipulating the color correction more. So you can see I haven't done much to the color because the LUT is doing most of that work. And I didn't really need to do a whole lot. This one I've sharpened to 3. That's probably pushing it normally where I would sharpen. This one was just a little blurrier than I wanted it to be. And then here's my LUT right here. I'll take off all of these and you can see the difference. Here's what it looks like with the effects on. And here's what it looks like before the effects. It's both a big difference and not a big difference all at once. Looks much better with the effects on, but I'm not really changing the video in any substantial way other than bringing the exposure and colors up to where I want them. So this is effects on, effects off, effects on, effects off, wax on, wax off. So I just add a fade in and fade out. If you're editing this as part of an entire online service, you'd be fading in and fading out from other parts of the service. Since I already have the words in the video and don't have to add them in post right now, that's pretty much all I need to do. I'm done and I'm ready to export this. So we just go to share 1080p because that's what I filmed in and let it export. We have a final worship music video. Here's what that final video looks like. Hello everyone, glad to see you here for worship today. Let's start with a call to worship from Psalm 22. Immortal, invisible, God only wise, enlightened, accessible, hid from our eyes. Just as I am, thou will receive, will walk on pardon, cleanse, relieve, on which the Prince of glory died, my richest gain. So that's how I create my worship music videos. Hopefully that helps you to create your own worship music videos for your online church. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'll try to answer any questions as best I can, and I will see you back here next week.